everybody to our Wednesday night Zoom with our fantastic guest tonight. We have General Yossi Kuperwasser. Tonight we're talking discussion of Behind the Frontlines, Understanding Israel's Strategic Reality. I'd like to thank Danny Lamb, the chairman of the JISS, that's the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, for organizing our speaker tonight and assisting us with putting on tonight's event. Thank you very much, Danny. Tonight we're talking Israel engaged in the war, many fronts amongst a shifting Middle East. We have the pleasure of having an unfiltered briefing on Israel's security challenges, geopolitical shifts, and the opportunities that lie ahead. A bit of background on our guest tonight. Kuperwasser heads the Jerusalem Institute of Security and Strategy. He was formerly Director General of Israel Ministry of Strategic Affairs and head of the Research Division of the IDF Military Intelligence. It is a pleasure to have you with us, and please take it away, Kuperwasser.
Thank you everybody for coming. And what can I tell you? The Middle East now is in such a situation that every day comes with a totally new situation, and we have to make an assessment by the hour, because we are watching the trip of President Trump to the region, and he's been to Saudi Arabia in the last couple of days, and so many things have happened once he was there, while he was there, that we have to really make several steps backwards in order to look at the general picture and be able to understand what's going on. So in general terms, I would say that what we are experiencing is a recovery from what happened on October 7th and trying to use the leverage that we had since then in order to reshape the Middle East. And we are doing that pretty impressively, in the sense that the Middle East of today is so different than the Middle East of October 6 that you can hardly notice that these are the same people living in the same area. On October 6, we were surrounded by the Iranian-led Axis that was trying to strangle Israel and to put so much pressure on Israel that Israel would be in an existential threat. And to the extent that Hamas felt confident enough to embark on this horrific, barbaric attack of October 7th. And it was going their way. They have put a lot of pressure on Israel, and the self-confidence of Israelis was in the lowest place. But ever since then, we managed to weaken this Iranian-led Axis to the point that it lost Syria altogether. It lost the ability to put pressure on us from Lebanon, as we managed to decimate Hezbollah to the point that they are unable to retaliate to the ongoing pressure we put on them, and not only us, but also the Lebanese government. Iran has been exposed as extremely dangerous on the one hand, because they launched all these missiles towards us and are accumulating a lot of highly enriched uranium that can be turned into fissile material within no time at all. But at the same time has been proven so vulnerable and weak, because we proved that there is a credible military option to deal with their nuclear facilities that can be used if the Americans reach a dead end in their negotiations with Iran. And the rest of the Middle East is interested in shaping a new Middle East that is going to confront the threats emanating from the radicals and move towards more stability. And the Abraham Accords managed to withstand all the pressures that were put in their direction. And the Trump visit is all about trying to make more countries join the Abraham Accords. He was trying with Saudi Arabia. The prices that the Saudis want for that are too high, so Israel is not ready yet to go in this direction. And he's trying now also with Syria. He's proposing to Syria to join the Abraham Accords. I don't know what the Syrians are going to do with that. Israel is not very fond of the current regime in Syria. But if they are going to offer to join the Abraham Accords, we are going to be in a different place. So all of that is happening, and Hamas himself is under a lot of pressure, not yet to the point that we want it to be, but definitely growing pressure, and the threat of the chariots of Gideon hovers over Hamas, and they have to take this into account. So, and in all the areas, there are pressures from Israel and from the United States, not always coordinated pressure, but definitely a lot of pressure coming from both Israel and the United States in an effort to shape the future of the Middle East in a way that would enable us to enjoy better life and better stability and better prosperity together in the Middle East. And this is something that's totally the opposite of what happened on October 7th. And once, as I said, when you make a step backwards, you see this this grand design of the Middle East, and you may be more optimistic. But once you now go back and make two steps forward and look at any and every arena more carefully and more from a closer look, then you see a different picture. See that the pressures applied in all the arenas are not sufficient enough yet in order to create the conditions we are looking for. You see that more pressure is necessary. You see that greater coordination between the United States and Israel is necessary, because one of the things you see if you look closer is that there are some differences of opinion between Israel and the United States on almost each and every arena. And though the ideals that we are trying to achieve are very similar, the way to achieve them, we are not necessarily on the same page on every and each arena. And let's look at the arenas one by one and see what is the Israeli goal, how we are going to achieve it, and what is the American goal, and what kind of impact it has on Israel's ability to achieve its goals. So let's start with Gaza. In Gaza, what Israel wants is to achieve all the goals of the war, not necessarily at the same time, but in a certain order. There's a big debate in Israel what the order should be. There's a school of thought that says, let's start with releasing the hostages and accepting the Hamas conditions, withdraw from Gaza, let Hamas stay in power. The most important thing is to release the hostages, and that's much more important than everything else. So let's do that, and in the future we shall be able to come back to Gaza and do the rest of the work that is necessary to be done under different conditions and without hostages. And there's another school of thought that says the most important thing is to get rid of Hamas, to remove it from power, to destroy Hamas military capabilities, and to make sure that Gaza cannot be a launching pad for future attacks against Israel. And once we do that, Hamas will be under such pressure that they are going to release the hostages as well. And that's how we are going to achieve all the goals simultaneously, or gradually, but very closely, one after the other. And there's the third school of thought, that is the school of thought of the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, that speaks as option 2, but behaves as something in the middle. He says, let's put a lot of pressure, let's make Hamas believe that we are ready to go all the way and remove them from power, hoping that this is going to convince them to go to the Witkoff formula that says that in this stage they are going to release something like half of the hostages, but we are not going to give them a commitment to stop the war and allow them to stay in power. But after a short period of a ceasefire, we shall resume the war until we get rid of Hamas and remove them from power. This is the option of putting pressure without doing all the military action and the ground offensive to its full extent. That's what's happening in Gaza. The American position on that is that although we think that Hamas should not stay in power, but it's more important for us to make sure that the war stops as soon as possible. And so they also, like Netanyahu, hold the rope on both sides. And it's very difficult to understand how they are going to overcome this tension, because Hamas is not going to leave Gaza and be ready to give somebody else to govern Gaza and disarm itself, because the most important thing for Hamas is to stay in power. And for Hamas, the question of whether it stays in power or not is an existential question. if they are giving up the power in Gaza and disarm themselves, it means that the 7th of October was a mistaken move. And this is too difficult for Hamas to accept. They cannot declare that 7th of October was a mistake. If they stay in power, they can say that even though we paid a heavy price and we show our readiness to sacrifice and so on and so forth, but we eventually stayed in power, and our initial assessment that Israel is not going to take over all of Gaza and remove us from power was correct. And that means that the 7th of October was the right move. And it's going to contribute considerably to the erosion of the self-confidence of the Zionists and the Jews. And eventually they are going to leave, and we are going to have our day when Zionism is destroyed and not us. So that's the plan of Hamas. And unless you go all the way and remove them from power, or make sure that they understand that there is no other way, because you are going to actually do a very big ground offensive that would remove them from power, unless this happens, they don't want to succumb to the pressure that is put on them. And what happened with the Americans is that the Americans gave them some air and some wind in their sails, because the deal about Idan Alexander, though it was important in releasing Idan Alexander himself, but made Hamas feel that they are an international player. They get legitimacy, they get recognition from the Americans. The next stage of negotiations is going to be handled when Hamas and the Americans are going to sit face to face. That's recognition, and that makes them feel that they are becoming the most important player in the Palestinian arena, and maybe beyond that. And this is going to be a message to all most radical Muslims that 7th of October pays off. And the attitude of Hamas these days following the Idan Alexander deal is not very promising if you want to make a deal along the Witkoff formula. Although they might use this opportunity, it depends on how much pressure we put on them. And the attack last night on the leadership of Hamas in Khan Yunis, that probably led to the killing of Mohammed Sinwar, is a clear message from Israel that we are ready to charge a heavy price from you, so you'd rather go to the Witkoff formula. And it's so you see, everything is interconnected and everything is interrelated, and we'll see to what extent this is going to have an impact on Hamas, because now without Sinwar, they even lack clear leadership inside the Gaza Strip. It's not clear who's going to make the decisions and where the buck stops in Gaza. So it's even more complicated now, at least for the short run, what's going to be the impact of the attack in Khan Yunis on the negotiations. All in all, it's a complicated game in Gaza, and it's even more complicated because the question arises of what's going to be in the day after. Okay, suppose we manage to eventually remove Hamas from power. What's going to be there on the day after? And what I think is going to be there, because I don't think that we're going to find many candidates to take over the Gaza Strip from us, is that we shall have to establish some sort of civil administration and be responsible for security in Gaza, be responsible for fighting terrorism from Gaza. There's still going to be a lot of terror even after we take over. And this is going to require an ongoing investment by Israel, much less than what some people say, because they want to convince us not to do that. But still considerable amount of money and the danger to our soldiers that are going to be deployed over there. And we shall need something like 2 to 3 divisions to be deployed, at least in the initial period of time. But this is necessary because there's no other option if we want to reach a situation where all goals of the war are being achieved. That's the situation regarding Gaza. We can come back to that later. Regarding Iran, the situation is also complicated, because what Israel wants is to make sure that once we build the capability to put a lot of pressure on Iran, and the Iranians are suffering from their economic situation because of the economic sanctions and being exposed to the credible military options that hovers over their military nuclear program, and this is the best time to extract concessions from them. Still, Iran is very dangerous, and the Americans, you hear them one day saying exactly what we are saying, and one day saying something different. What we are saying is that this pressure should be used in order to make sure that Iran is not allowed to have any enrichment capability, that Iran has to give up all the stockpiles that it has accumulated during the last 4 years, that Iran will be ready to allow real verification and monitoring of their program to make sure that it's really dismantled, and that this verification will be possible anywhere, anytime, without any limitations, and that the restrictions on the Iranian nuclear project will not be limited in time, but will last forever. And if they want to have a program for peaceful purposes, they can have it, but under strict verification and without enrichment. That's what Israel wants. It also wants to make sure that the Iranians come clean on all kinds of elements that comprise the plan that they had that before 2003, that they didn't declare some of the sites that were part of this program. And it's high time that they gave the information about what happened then. The Americans, on the other hand, say the same thing that we are saying, but behave as if there is, or sometimes behave as if they are going to be ready to go for less than that. And we all remember that at one point, Steve Witkoff, who leads these negotiations, said, well, maybe the Iranians should be allowed to have enrichment to 3.67. Remind you that 3.67 is about 50% of the way to having fissile material, although it sounds like a low level. And so it's the Americans have uttered that, and there is an ongoing battle in America, in the U.S. administration, inside the administration, between those who are committed to putting really heavy pressure on Iran in order to get what Israel wants and what the Americans should want. And there are others who are those as we call the isolationists and the America-only attitude, unlike America first, that argue that this is not necessary to put that pressure because we can live with less. And that's something that may create tensions between us and the Americans. So far, the president and Witkoff now in the later stages are saying the right things, and I hope this is the positions they are making in presenting in the negotiations. We are already after round 4 of the negotiations, and both sides say that the negotiations are serious and they are optimistic. And okay, you never know what this means, but they definitely didn't reach yet a breakthrough that includes concession by the Americans. I hope this is not going to happen, because this is really important to make sure that the Iranians don't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons in the future. So, but if these talks are going to end with a dead end and fail, and I'm sure that the Iranians are going to play for time and try to convince the Americans to have more talks and more talks forever. But if at a certain point, as Trump says, there is limited time for negotiations, and we reach a dead end, then the military option should be used. And I say that the military option is credible now, and that's the important thing about it. It's credible both in the sense that we can, together with the Americans especially, destroy the Iranian nuclear project, and we are ready and able to charge the Iranians with a very heavy price if they retaliate and try to hit American, Israeli, or Gulf targets as a retaliation for an Israeli-American attack on their nuclear facilities. And I think what we did in Yemen was done in order to deter the Houthis, but also in order to send a message to the Saudis, to the Iranians, that we can reach you. Iran is closer than Yemen, and we can cause a lot of damage to your infrastructure. So bear that in mind when you make your calculations about what you're going to present as your position in the military nuclear program negotiations. So we are anyhow getting ready, and together with the Americans are ready for taking the necessary action. Regarding the Houthis, this is clearly an area where we and the Americans are not necessarily on the same page. We were surprised, and we were unhappy with the American decision to stop the confrontation with the Houthis, in spite of the fact that they continue launching missiles in our direction, including this morning. So it's a strange situation where the Americans are not involved anymore in the war, and we have to deal with the Houthis that are so far away by ourselves. And we can do that too, but it's costly. It should have been this way, and there's a disappointment in Israel for what has happened, and I don't think that this is going to change. So I believe that we are going to carry out more attacks in Yemen, and we keep warning the Yemenites that we might do that in the immediate future, and I guess eventually this is going to happen. And another area where it's a complicated situation and the pressure is not necessarily happening in tandem between us and the Americans is Syria. We still are under the impression that President Shara is an ex-terrorist and is coming and is representing Al-Qaeda in Syria, a group that Hayat Tahrir Sham, the group that he heads, is the Al-Qaeda in Syria. And it's very strange to see the President of the United States meets him. After all, it's only 24 years since Al-Qaeda carried out the attack in New York and Washington. But this is the case. And we have to realize that the situation is such that the international community has decided to allow Shara to have a chance of rebuilding Syria out of their own considerations, and that Shara is wise enough to adopt a very sophisticated policy that presents him as in suit and tie, and everybody was very happy to see him in this new dress, and immediately believed that he has changed his mind. Yes, there are still some conditions that President Trump has put forward in front of Shara when they met earlier today, but he's already decided to lift the sanctions over Syria, and this was the main expectation of the Syrians and of the Saudis and of the Turks, and it was given to them in spite of Israel's concerns. So yes, we and the Americans both, and by the way, also Shara and the Turks and the Saudis, we all want to see Iran out of Syria. We all are very happy that Iran is out. We are all very happy that Syria doesn't serve as a way through which weapons can come from Iran to Lebanon, to Hezbollah in Lebanon. But this is not enough, and we expect more from Shara. We want to make sure that he adopts an inclusive attitude towards the Druze, and that's something that cannot be guaranteed at this point, and we have a commitment to them. And we want also to hear from him a clear commitment to not let anybody with hostile intentions to be deployed in the southern part of Syria. That's why we took over the slopes, the eastern slopes of the Golan. Finally, with Lebanon, we are still working very hard to make sure that Hezbollah is not able to regroup and rearm. We reached an agreement that ended the war, that allows us to take action, unlike what happened until October 6, 2023. We are allowed to take action in order to prevent Hezbollah from rearming itself and redeploying in the south, and rearming itself even beyond the south. And we're doing that very intensively and very successfully. And Hezbollah is in such a bad shape that the Lebanese government feels empowered enough to put pressure on Hezbollah and to speak about disarming Hezbollah, which is not necessarily going to happen. But even the debate about this matter is very promising, and I hope it's going to gain momentum. Finally, I want to say a word about our national security concept and how the war now has affected our national security concept. We were very deeply dependent on deterrence and early warning, as you know, in our the national security concept that we had before the war. Now we have replaced that with prevention. We want to make sure that our enemies are unable to deploy with hostile intentions along our borders. We do that in Gaza. That's why we keep our commitment to making sure that Gaza would not be launching pad for terror attacks in the future. We do it in Lebanon, where we are making sure that Hezbollah doesn't redeploy in the south. We do it in Syria, where we want to make sure that nobody with hostile intentions deploy along the border in the Golan Heights. And we do it also in the Judea and Samaria territory, where we change our policy, and instead of carrying out short period of time raids towards centers of terrorism in the Judea and Samaria area, now we work in a much more permanent way in those areas, especially the refugee camps of Jenin and the area of Tulkarem. And this is going to change quite considerably the ability of the Palestinian terrorists to carry out terror attacks. Not that it's going to bring an end to that, but it's going to make it more difficult for them to carry out terror attacks. And we see a decline in the number of terror attacks in the Samaria area quite considerably. Again, it has not ended, but it's more difficult for them to operate. And this, together with a new approach to reliance, and we understand that we have to change something in the extent to which we rely on the Americans for our security. And the Prime Minister has spoken about it 2 days ago, I think it was, in the Knesset Committee for Security and Foreign Affairs. And we in the JISS wrote a paper about it a couple of weeks ago. And I think we have to be more self-reliant because everything that happened now, and especially since October 7th, sorry, proves that we cannot be so dependent on getting what we need from foreigners. There are certain elements of our security that we have to be able to produce ourselves and supply ourselves, and we have to be less dependent on American aid. This cannot happen overnight, but the direction should be moving in this towards this goal. And I'll stop here and open it for questions. I think this was an opening.
Thank you very much. We will jump to our CEO, Robert Gregory, Robert Gregory, to do a quick promotion for next week.
Hey, thank you so much, Yossi. It was a very thorough briefing. And I can see there's a lot of people with questions with their hands up. So excited to see those questions. And thanks, Danny Lamb, chairman of the JISS, for organizing a very interesting evening tonight. Just tell you briefly, next week, it's a bit of a change, not a political topic. We have Melody Corman, who heads up the Israel Space Forum. We'll be giving a bit of a talk about Israel's space industry and some of the developments there, so should be very interesting. Just a couple of other events to be aware of that AJA is taking part in. We have Eddie Boaz, who's an AJA member, Holocaust survivor reunion. He's a Holocaust survivor himself, his initiative, and it's been headed by George Foster of the Australian Association of Jewish Holocaust Survivors and their descendants. So make sure you have a look at that. It's on the 1st of June. All these events are in the AJA email, so make sure you check today's email. We've also got this Friday night a young adult Shabbat dinner for those who are in Sydney, which is AJA is doing in conjunction with Central Synagogue. So that's very exciting as well. And then lastly, everyone would have seen we have our upcoming AJA 2025 trip to Israel. Hopefully everyone here can make it. It'll be great to travel with you, see Israel. It's a bit different than some of the other organizations' trips. We'll be going a lot of time in Judea, Samaria, seeing some of the security challenges, the religious sites, and a lot more interesting things. So be in touch with Tennille if you want to book. But Limited early bird tickets are available now, so make sure you sign up. Over to you, Tennille.
Thank you, Robert. We'll start our Q&A with Hugh Kitson. Please unmute.
Hello, Yossi. It's good to see you again. I sent you a link to Whose Land a little bit earlier this morning. My question is, you mentioned about the Abraham Accords. President Trump is obviously trying to get Saudi Arabia involved in that, but it was too high a price for Israel. Does that mean, first of all, is President Trump realizing that Israel has some real security terms? And second, what was that price that was too high for Israel?
Well, first of all, I believe that President Trump understands the problem with the price that Saudis are trying to extract from Israel in return for the readiness to move on normalization. Because the fact is that he didn't refer too deeply to this option, even though it was probably on his list, on his wish list when he went to Saudi Arabia and when he planned to go there. The three requests of the Saudis are first, guarantee that there is a path that leads to two-state solution. This MBS referred today to the Arab initiative. He says this is still valid, and this is speaking about Palestinian state over the 67 territories. So this is demand number one. That is very problematic. The support in Israel for a two-state solution today is really low. And it's clear that after we gave the Palestinians an opportunity to build a de facto state in Gaza, and we ended up in the attack of 7th of October against territories that are inside Israel of Sphere 48. It's clear that it makes no sense to allow them to have another chance to do that. So he understands, I guess, that there is a problem with the two-state solution. Secondly, the Saudis want the ability to enrich uranium in the context of a peaceful nuclear program. Israel is worried about that, and we saw that this was not publicly mentioned so far in the references made by President Trump or by the Saudis. Third, there's the expectations of the Saudis that they will get state-of-the-art weaponry from the United States. There is a deal now of $140 billion that was approved by President Trump. It's not clear yet what exactly does that include, and I hope the commitment of the Americans to the qualitative military edge of Israel over the Saudis and over any of our neighbors here is not going to be ignored. It's not easy. We have the precedents of the AWACS deal back in the 80s, and it's still a problematic situation because you cannot just take from the Saudis all kinds of things and not give anything, even without normalization. And that's why I'm worried that this deal is going to include all kinds of really problematic elements. But if we still manage not to allow the Saudis to force Trump to demand from us a Palestinian state or a nuclear capability, then it's less than what could have been expected. It's more than what should have been done.
Thank you, Yossi. Alan, please unmute.
Thanks, Tennille, and thanks, Yossi. Yossi, I want to ask you about Qatar because it seems that for the last 18 months or so, they've rather successfully played both sides of the conflict, managing to convince much of the world and even parts of the Israeli government at times that it's part of the solution and not the problem. And now they seem to have even won the heart of President Trump by giving him an aeroplane. So what do you make of their role in this whole picture?
Well, Qatar is a very complicated player. We can focus on their bad actions, and there are many. I think that the balance is way more negative than positive when you look at Qatar. First of all, they poison the minds of the people in the West and in the Middle East against Israel. They are through Al Jazeera, AJ Plus, and through their donations to the education system in the United States and elsewhere. They poison the minds of the people and make them adopt anti-Israeli positions that in the long run are more dangerous than what they're doing against us now. And first of all, I think, and that, by the way, President Trump is very active and is on our side. And part of that, at least, is very active. But and they also support all kinds of problematic elements in the Middle East, including Hamas, including Shara in Syria and elsewhere. So their bad activities are well known and outweigh the positive activities that they carry out from time to time. But you can say that they were supportive from time to time in releasing some of the hostages, and they do have some sort of leverage, limited leverage over Hamas. Although the fact that they allow Hamas to have a safe haven in Doha is outweighing all the good things that they do in vis-a-vis Hamas as well. So it's a very problematic player. In my mind, we should not be misled by their attempt to pretend to be the good guys. But on the other hand, they do have a lot of money. And when you get a prize, a gift, sorry, of that worth 140 something million dollars, or maybe more, 400, if I remember correctly, then it's very difficult to avoid falling in their net. And I know of many Jewish American leaders that fell into this net, and many mainstream leaders in the United States that fell into this net, including some of the most respectable universities and professors and Israeli, so Zionist leaders and so on and so forth, including also some of the people in Israel that were close to the prime minister that also carried out all kind of missions for the Qataris, not against Israel, but it was a business-like arrangement, but it was problematic, of course.
Thank
On
you.
the other hand, by the way, just to say, some of the stories in this respect seem to me fake news. I don't believe that Netanyahu personally took $50 million from the Qataris, but other stories seem to be true.
Thank you, Yossi. Colin, please unmute.
Thank you very much, Yossi, for your very lucid comments. From the outside, it would appear that Egypt has very badly broken the agreement with Israel, and I'd like your opinion on where do you think that is going to go now? And the other thing is Turkey seems to be aiming to be the big macher in the Middle East. Is that good or bad for Israel? And finally, do the Kurds have a place in Israeli society, like Gaza?
Well, let's start with Egypt. Egyptians are the most important thing, as I said before. If we take a step backwards and look at the grand picture, then Egypt is committed to looking at the peace with Israel as their strategic choice. And that's the good news. And as long as they are committed to the peace as their strategic choice, it is very important for Israel, just like the peace we have with Jordan. These are the two longest borders we have. These are the two states that we are facing directly. And with militaries, especially the Egyptian military, that is huge military and very capable. And we have to maintain the peace with them as far as we can. It's extremely important. That said, we are worried about Egypt. Egypt did not do what we expected it to do in preventing weapons from being smuggled into Gaza. It could have done a much better job. And we cannot trust the Egyptians to do the job better in the future. That's why we cannot afford leaving the Philadelphia corridor, because if we leave, God knows what's going to happen with Hamas. Egypt is building its military with the view of a certain reference enemy, and this reference enemy is us. And we have to be worried because they built a huge army, and they even deploy it in defiance of the peace agreement inside Sinai. So we have approved much of it when they were fighting the terrorists, but we haven't heard of much terrorist activities in Sinai for the last year or so. And the Egyptian deployment over there is still there and growing. So we are definitely worried about these elements, and we are worried of the fact that there is no attempt by the Egyptian leadership, no real attempt by the Egyptian leadership to change the attitude of the public in Egypt towards Israel. They do things from time to time. I don't want to underestimate it, but they can do better. They can do more. So, and that's why the peace remains extremely cold. And we are concerned about all these issues, but we focus on maintaining the strategic elements of the peace, and this is the most important thing about that. Regarding Turkey, and by the way, well, in Egypt, we have to also to sit to the drawing table and say, what are we going to do if this is going to change? Because we are not going to be able to build an army that can face the Egyptian threat overnight. So we have to think what are the things that we have to do today. So if something changes in Egypt, we shall be able to come up with a solution within a reasonable time. Going back to Turkey, Turkey has its aspirations. It definitely wants to be a very important player in the Middle East. From time to time, it seems that Erdogan refers to himself as, or looks at himself as the new Sultan of Istanbul, and it's definitely a threat. And they are now closer to us since they are standing behind Shara in Syria, and Erdogan participated in the meeting between Shara and MBS and President Trump today. So it is definitely a player when it comes to Syria and beyond. We see that President Trump, this is another issue, I didn't follow that too, out of limitations of time. But this is another area where we and the President Trump don't see things eye to eye. We consider Turkey a problematic player, especially with all the declarations and statements made by Erdogan. It's a source of concern for us. Whereas President Trump cannot stop praising President Erdogan again and again. So it's a problematic situation for us. But we believe that at least we can also look at the half full part of the glass, because as long as the Americans are so close to the Turks, you can imagine that they have some leverage on them that can be translated into some understandings between us and the Kurds, and the Turks. And we have to remember that we have a common friend, we and the Turks, called Azerbaijan. And we conduct negotiations with the Turks about the future of Syria in Baku. And it seems that these negotiations are going relatively well, at least in as far as deconfliction and certain understandings between us and the Turks are possible. So far, it's not reached yet at the end, but so far it seems positive. And as I said before, we do have common interest with the Turks. First of all, we don't want to confront each other right now. Secondly, we don't want the Iranians to play a major role in Syria. Third, we want to make sure that the Hezbollah doesn't get weapons through Syria and that there is stability in Syria. So in this respect, we see things a little bit the same way. We can reach some understandings. The Kurds, that is the last issue that you mentioned, is a more problematic issue between us and the Turks. but we don't consider the Kurds of the same kind of commitment that we have to the Druze. And what we see is that the situation between the Kurds and the Turks is getting smoother and less acute, because you've probably noticed that the PKK has decided to dismantle itself, and that's a sign that the tensions between the Kurds and the Turks are dying down temporarily, and to some extent. We shouldn't be too much impressed by that, but it's in the right direction. If the Kurds are not going to be threatened by the Turks, it's exactly what we want to see happening.
Thank you, Yossi. Cheryl, please unmute.
Thanks, Manil. Hello, General. Thank you so much tonight for your briefing. My first is that Steve Witkoff is the wrong person for the job, as he doesn't appear to understand the psyche of the enemy. But I'm very keen to hear what your thoughts are on him.
I didn't hear you well, so can somebody repeat your question?
I think the question was about Steve Witkoff, whether he's the right person for the job. Or...
Well, we don't nominate people to represent President Trump. He's the personal envoy of President Trump, and the president feels confident and satisfied with him leading so many negotiations with Russia, with Ukraine, with the Saudis, with the Hamas, with everybody. So it's with Iran, of course, first and foremost. So it's he's playing a very important role, and he has the confidence and the trust of President Trump, and that it is. Of course, I'm sure that he spends a lot of time learning all the issues that he has to work on, and he didn't have the expertise before he started. But I think that he definitely has a positive learning curve, and is much more aware of the details today than he used to be in the beginning. And this, for example, what he said on the Iranian enrichment issue and on the first round was different than what he said later, and probably he learned his lesson. That he has to be much more cautious with what he says publicly, at least. And I hope that this positive learning curve will continue, that he will be more able to represent the United States on all these issues in a way that really reflects what the president has to say. As I said, I didn't mention Witkoff in my presentation because the issue is President Trump, not his representative. I'm sure that the representative does what the president wants him to do.
Thank you, Yossi. Solomon, please unmute.
Thank you, it's Neil. Thank you, General. At some point, the war ends and a rebuild has to happen. So the Trump plan for the rebuild, is it sheer crazy? Is it sheer brilliance? Why not a clean slate for rebuilding in which the old can be cleared out, tunnels and all, allowing then for the creation of a safe new zone for the temporarily displaced?
Again, I would have to ask for somebody to repeat it. It doesn't sound clear to me.
The question, I think, was about the Trump plan for Gaza, whether it's crazy or brilliant.
It's way out of the box. That's what I'm saying is clear. I mean, no Israeli could have said this, even though many Israelis had this in mind. No Israeli could have said this thing, because for Israelis to say that is to ask for international criticism immediately. And President Trump has the ability to say things that we are not allowed to say, and that's the nice thing about what he said. And I think that by doing that, he forced everybody to think hard of things that can really be a solution. You don't want the Trump plan come up with something that is feasible, that is reasonable, and that can stand in line with the three demands of Israel: that Hamas is removed from power, that hostages are released, and that Gaza does not serve as a launching pad for terror in the future. I think the good thing about the Trump plan is that it's in line with these demands. And many people will tell you that if you let the Palestinian population stay in Gaza, eventually, even with or without Hamas, there's going to be terrorism. Whereas without the population, it's not going to be. That said, I am skeptical about the chances of this plan to be fully executed, because many of the Palestinians will rather stay and not leave. Some of them may leave, and even if some of them leave, it's a step in the right direction. But we are not going to be forcibly asking them to leave. We can encourage them positively, we can encourage them negatively, but we are not going to force anybody to leave, because this is going to be a war crime. And that's why we have doubts of whether this plan is going to be fully exercised.
Thank you, Yossi. We are almost out of time for this evening. So for our final question, we put the question to you. How can our audience and we stay more informed, more up to date, and support Israel more than we already are?
Well, first of all, thank you for your support, as it is. It's very important, and we need support more than ever. With the attitude of the international community towards Israel today, we definitely need more and more support. Secondly, please work on the public opinion in Australia, because this is very important. We see what's happening, and the attacks against Israel that are very often tend to be attacks against Jews are a problem that we have to deal with. And the more you are involved, the more you are able to have an impact on that, the better it is. If you want to get to be informed, the best thing that I can offer, and I think it's very important, is become a member of the newsletter we have, and visit often our website, Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And you will see that it's a wonderful place to be in, because we have the best experts, and we are trying very hard to present all kinds of opinion. We have the most knowledgeable experts, and they don't always agree. And we just held, by the way, for example, a webinar this last Sunday about where's Gaza going, and we had 4 experts, and each one of them had a different opinion. So we allow a variety of opinions to be presented on our pages. And it's also the best place to learn about what's happening beyond the news, the immediate news. And I really highly recommend joining the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security as a source of information and a source of enriching yourself with the opinions of the experts.
Thank you. And I've just linked that newsletter into our chat for everybody who's listening online or J-Air tomorrow on the radio. That website is jiss.org.il. And you can find on there the English newsletter and more information. Yossi, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on our show this evening. We thank you for joining us. We thank everybody who's joined us this evening. I will remind you that this has been recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And please share this with your family and friends. It is not often that we get the chance to have such a high-level briefing where we're finding out the facts from the source. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and we thank you again.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.